Okay, next item is item 5, e-cigarette use ordinance update. We're going to take a short break. Okay, we're going to continue. Item 5, e-cigarette use ordinance update. Who's presenting for this? Oh, go ahead and state your name, Paul.
Yep. Paul Cummings with Alameda County Public Health Department. Is that too loud?
No, it's perfect.
Okay. All right. So this draft ordinance was last year in September, and it's been modified slightly since then. So
Michelle, can you take that out there, please? Sorry. That's okay. We want to focus. Go ahead, Paul. Sorry.
Sure, that's okay. So I want to tell you where we are as far as the ordinance, give you a recap of the ordinance, explain what the change was, and then listen to comments and input.
Okay.
So, Supervisor Chen's office had us make a change to the ordinance. They're asking that this draft be the one that's heard at the Board of Supervisors. Supervisor Miley asked that we come back to this committee to get input from your committee and the public about the ordinance and the change. So that's why we're here. So just to clarify, this is the language that's going to go forward, but that doesn't mean that's if an ordinance is adopted, that this is the language that will be adopted. The Board of Supervisors can always change things when they hear the ordinance. Briefly, the ordinance treats e-cigarettes as tobacco products. What that means is that you can't use e-cigarettes in places where smoking cigarettes is banned. It means that e-cigarettes need to be sold the way tobacco products are, which means they need to be behind the counter. You can't have vending machines. They can't be on an open shelf. They need to be behind the counter where a clerk would help them. And they also, the sampling restrictions that apply to tobacco products would also apply to e-cigarettes. The main change between the draft that you heard in September, and this is in the definitions. So in this draft, e-cigarettes are listed as are defined as one of many tobacco products, including cigarettes, cigars, chewed tobacco, etc. This is in line with federal court rulings, which back in 2010, some of the e-cigarette companies sued because the FDA wanted to regulate them as drug delivery devices, and they sued that they were tobacco products. And the e-cigarette companies won, and so writing our ordinance this way makes us consistent with the federal law. Well, not the federal law, but the federal decision. So that's the main change. And I'm open to questions, really here to try and collect input so that when this goes to the Board of Supervisors, I can make sure that everybody's voices and comments are heard at that level.
My only question right now is when does it go to the Board of Supervisors?
I don't know yet. So it's scheduled here, obviously, and it's going to an Incorporated Services Committee next week, and then after that, it will be scheduled to be put on the board's agenda. So I'm thinking it might be later this spring but I don't know.
Okay.
So basically, the council's concerns about, you know, the being regulated exactly the same as tobacco products hasn't changed. That's the same approach.
Yes.
Okay, and you kind of lost me there. You were talking about you're trying to say you're in line with court decisions now. Is that some new information that popped up? Because we were all trying to figure out before what you were trying to be in line with, other than the American Cancer Society, of course. But.
Yeah. So no, there was a federal decision at the Court of Appeals back in 2010 that said that declared that these were not drug delivery devices, that they were tobacco products.
Okay, but you're saying this is a change from the last time this came to us?
The definition has changed, yes.
And has
So-
that definition not changed largely? I know it's Supervisor Chan's office, but at the request of the American Lung Association, didn't they send a letter shortly after this went to the Board of Supervisors and requested that, and then subsequently Supervisor Chan requested that this be put in there?
I think so, but I don't, you know, I don't see that, yes, so.
Okay.
So the change is the definition of electronic smoking device,
Yes.
which pretty much encompasses everything here. It looks, is this an improvement? I mean,
No,
Yeah.
this actually makes it worse.
Yeah.
So basically, this says regardless, you're making a tobacco product, but regardless of whether it has any tobacco in it or not, it is a tobacco product. Is how your part B, where under tobacco product, where you've crossed out everything that refers to tobacco, which is almost funny. And then you add B, any electronic smoking device. So whether it has tobacco in it or not. Correct?
Yes.
Yes. And the rationale for that was because it's still beyond me.
The rationale is that if someone is trying to enforce this ordinance, they can't tell what is in the solution. So if we want an enforceable ordinance, this is the only way to go.
Hi, Fairman Crawford, Office of County Council. I might be able to shed a little bit more light as to what's happened. So the prior version basically said everywhere where in our old ordinances it said tobacco product, it said or electronic smoking device, right? You basically have the same effect here, but you're correct. We've just taken electronic smoking devices and included them in tobacco products. Now the justification is the federal court decision, the Sotera decision in 2010, and in addition, there was a choice to align with proposed legislation and existing legislation on the local level, and also to align with proposed legislation at the FDA level and at the state level.
So shouldn't we wait till all that happens instead of trying to be at the vanguard of this thing? I mean, just because other jurisdictions might be getting it wrong, we need to jump on that bandwagon, or I'm not following the logic.
To get in line with what people foresee as coming along in terms of how these products are defined.
Yeah, it just seems like that should occur first. It's like the cart before the horse, essentially. I mean, if we're going to align ourselves with law, shouldn't it be law first?
Well, we do have the existing federal decision, the court decision.
That's not law, though. That's just.
That is law. That's case law.
What case was that?
The Sotera decision in 2010. I can give you the site.
Thank you.
Wasn't that the decision that was appealed by the tobacco industry and then they prevailed?
No, that decision occurred at the appellate level, and that's the prevailing law coming out of the DC Circuit.
Okay. Okay, so we'll go to the speaker cards. Serena Chen.
Do I just stand here and do my PE class voice? Good evening, my name is Serena Chen. I'm with the American Lung Association. I passed out some things. I wanted to share with you what's happening here in Alameda County by the numbers with electronic cigarettes. The number of cities in Alameda County that include e-cigarettes in their secondhand smoke laws, there are 9 of them, adding up to over 800,000 people. The cities in Alameda County that restrict the sale of e-cigarettes, there are 6 of them, that's over 900,000 people in those 6 cities. And the number of neighboring counties that have adopted a very similar ordinance as to what is before us today, the number of neighboring counties to Alameda that have adopted this ordinance are all of them: Contra Costa, Santa Clara, Marin, and San Francisco counties. The transit agencies that have prohibited e-cigarette use on the trains and on their property for BART, it's BART, AC Transit, Amtrak, and more. Right now in California, there are 18 million Californians living in places that restrict e-cigarette use. That's over 40% of the state's population. The reason why they're doing this is not because there's 100% proof that e-cigarettes are dangerous. They're not doing it because there's 100% proof of anything. Basically, they're doing it because they've spent the last 20 years trying to put the kibosh on cigarettes, regular cigarettes, and smoking. And they spend a lot of time looking at research that has been developed over the last 40, 50 years that has proven unequivocally that secondhand smoke, that nicotine, that smoking combustible cigarettes is a hazard and kills, at this point, maybe 500,000 Americans every year. They know this as a fact. This is all proven. So basically, these cities are looking at a device and they're going, wow, are they helping people quit smoking? Well, I have to say, yes. I know people who have quit smoking from e-cigarettes. I know Mr. Swanson, he's quit smoking with e-cigarettes. I have friends who have nothing to do with my tobacco life, have told me they have quit smoking with e-cigarettes. So I have to believe them. I have to believe them, right? But I also need to look at the evidence. I need to look at what's coming out in the research. So I just kind of broke it down to who uses e-cigarettes. There are adults who want to quit smoking. There are adult dual users. There are teen dual users. There are new teen users who, according to the studies about susceptibility of teens, they were not in line to ever become smokers. New teen users. And the other body of people are non-users, families and adults and people who choose not to use e-cigarettes. So far, the data that has been going out has shown, yes, there's a body of adult quitters. The largest group is actually adult dual users, which is 76.8% of all the people who use e-cigarettes also continue to smoke. So these laws are designed to put the kibosh on teen users. Basically, we're looking to restrict the sales to control them. And we're trying to protect non-users from the emissions. That's all this is about. So anyway, I'm just sharing some data with you that's come out, and I don't know why you resent the American Lung Association, because we've been trying for 50 years to help people not be smokers. We have helped Alameda County be 22% smokers down to 11% smokers. So we've been trying and working very hard to eliminate the burden of tobacco use on this community and throughout the state. And we're looking at e-cigarettes, we're worried that the kids are picking them up. We're seeing that the kids are picking them up. These laws will do nothing to stop an adult from buying an e-cigarette.
I had a question, I want to clarify, I don't resent the American Lung Association, so I'm not sure where that's even coming from. I do resent your continued manipulation of people, just like that statement that you just said. To me, that's nothing more than manipulation. I think the reason these jurisdictions do this is because for some reason, and I've never been able to figure this out, they are terrified of this grade that you give them. I mean, I spoke to Dublin City Council members and the mayor when they did this in Dublin, and I'm like, you know, what is the motivation for this? And they're like, oh my God, they're going to give us a bad grade if we don't do this. So I have no idea about the mind control you seem to have over lawmakers with this grade that you give out. But, you know, I listened to everything you just said, and you're like speaking in riddles. I mean, in one sentence, you're saying you want people to quit smoking, but then you have a device here that people use to quit smoking, and you want to make it harder to get. So aren't you working against your...
No, basically, as a public health organization, we cannot recommend anything that is not proven to be successful in what it says it does. So in the very beginning, the FDA looked at these devices and said, these are drug delivery devices designed to help people quit smoking, because that's what the marketing says. So the FDA took these devices and studied them, and they said, these are drug delivery devices because they claim to be designed to help people quit smoking. In order to be a successful cessation device, they have to jump through all the hoops that the patch people went through, that all the gum people went through, all the other people who said they had a device that helped people quit smoking. In order to prove it, and for the American people to be so-called protected, the FDA says you have to jump through these hoops. So these e-cigarette companies said, we don't want to jump through these hoops. We changed our minds. We're not a drug delivery device, we're a tobacco product. So actually they fought in court to be called a tobacco product. So the American Lung Association is saying, okay, they're calling themselves a tobacco product. They sued multiple times to be a tobacco product. So therefore they need to be regulated as such. I don't know why you think, I mean, you should ask all the people that I quote unquote manipulated. I haven't manipulated anybody. I'm only sharing the information that I've collected. And if people choose to believe it and follow it, or look for themselves and read the information, then that's their point of view. I think that you just have to look at the evidence, all of the evidence. Today I just read the study that showed that e-cigarette users were more successful at quitting smoking than not. And I read the whole study. And then I also read the other studies. And I've looked at all the studies combined. And as far as I'm concerned, the jury is still out. But the data is pointing in a direction that says that when they looked at e-cigarette users who were trying to quit and smokers who were trying to quit, smokers who are trying to quit and those who use e-cigarettes versus those who were quitting with other means or just cold turkey, they found that the other means people were 30% more likely to quit. We need more studies. We need to look at more people. We need to look at more circumstances. All we're saying is, number one, we do know that the emissions are dangerous. We do know that every day there's a new product and a new formulation being formed, and it's impossible to actually research them scientifically the way they should be, because the moment you've researched an e-cigarette product, they've changed it. So it's very hard. So we have to say caution, yellow light, caution. So in no way do these laws say that a person who's an adult cannot use these devices and cannot try to use them for quitting. And like I said, I believe the people who tell me they've quit using these devices. So I'm not saying, no, they're all wrong and they're all lying, but I'm asking people to please be open-minded and look at the other research that is pointing in another direction. I'm trying to look at all of it, and I'm trying to say, those communities, they were torn. They knew people who had quit smoking using these devices. But, you know, the mayor of Fremont, he shocked me. He said, you know, I don't like regulating business. You know, I want to allow business to have the ability to do what they do best. He says, but I go home and I look at my two little kids, and they're going to look at me and say, Daddy, weren't you in charge of Fremont when you decided this? He said, 10 years from now. So basically, what he was saying was he was looking at the signs that the number of middle school and high school kid use is tripling. I mean, they're worried that there's this other thing happening, but these laws don't stop people from using cigarettes. Just like right now, the secondhand smoke laws and the tobacco retail licenses haven't stopped the people who smoke. So
Okay.
anyway,
I gotta stop you because
Right.
we just
You
keep
asked
going
the question,
otherwise.
I answered.
My advice would be don't accuse people of resenting you, and they won't accuse you of manipulating.
I'm sorry, I was responding to Ms. Miraglia's.
Oh, she resents you? She resents you? I thought it was directed at me, I'm sorry.
Actually, I'm sorry, a little close there. I'd like to ask the return to the standing. I'm curious about something here. I was reading over the handout that you provided us, and just for clarification, and then if you can expand upon what the program is. Down at the bottom, it says the cities and counties who have taken action on e-cigarettes in 2014 and prior years receive a bonus point in the emerging issues section in the revised methodology. First of all, the syntax is completely wrong on that, so it's not descriptive of anything in this paragraph. Can you elaborate as to what the emerging issues section is in the revised methodology? And then also elaborate on how cities can earn 1 point for including e-cigarettes in their secondhand smoke laws and 1 point for regulating the sale of e-cigarettes. Because to me, it's not clear here, but I'm trying to understand. So it sounds like there's some sort of incentive program or some sort of program in place that incentivizes positioning e-cigarettes within municipalities and municipal law. So can you elaborate on how that works, what the program is? And I'm going to ask the chair to give it, if we need more than 3 minutes, to give you the 3 minutes.
Okay, that is a chapter from our State of Tobacco Control report card. And basically, I can't remember what year, maybe 2000, around 2000, the National Lung Association issued report card grades for every state in the union. And what they measured was, does this state provide support for cessation services? Does this state adequately fund tobacco prevention? Does this state have a sufficient tobacco tax? So those scores come out every year for each state. So in California, when we talked to reporters and said, here is California's grade, the reporters would say, well, you guys are passing all these local laws. You know, I don't care what the state's grade is. I want to know what Oakland's grade is, or I want to know what Piedmont's grade is. Or what was happening was the media was asking us to say, well, there are all these laws being passed, and the laws started being passed in the early 1980s. So,
can you elaborate on the mechanics of it, not the detail and the history, he said, she said.
Right.
I'd really like just the mechanics. In other words,
so
if a municipality does this, they get that, the system does this, does that. So just the mechanics of the objective.
So the only incentive for any city or any county to pass any of these laws is to know how well they're doing in a system where we're just comparing cities and counties to each other, like how well have you decided to protect the residents in your city.
So am I to assume that the state of California would get the cumulative benefit of the point for each of these cities? Do cities just get 1 point for one law? Do they get a point for every law? Well, I'm just trying to understand what's the definition. That's what I'm asking for, the mechanics of the thing.
The mechanics, there's 3 solid categories. The first category, the state has its own smoke-free workplace law. So anything above and beyond that, cities can see if they're passing these laws. And these cities started passing these laws before we made up this program.
So cities get, you can go on a website, and a city can have a grade in addition to the state.
Correct.
And the state receives no benefit in terms of
No
points or anything like that.
No one except the community that lives in each city gets a benefit in the sense of a public health benefit.
I'm not saying public health benefit. This is strictly about points and how it's, and tabulation and stuff like that.
Right, but there's no monetary benefit. There's no benefit.
I'm not asking for monetary, just the mechanics of how this works.
Right, so there's 3 main categories. The first category is outdoor air. So cities, if a city passes a ban on smoking in parks, they get 4 points. Outdoor dining, they get 4 points.
Okay, so what you're saying is for all laws that regulate smoking or air quality related to smoking, they get points. So the city can have, so every time they pass a law, so the answer to my previous question was yes, every time they pass a law, they do get a point. And a person can look up a city's grade and they can see some cities have 0, some cities may have 30 because they really have gone. Okay, good. So I understand how that works now. Good, thank you. That's what I was just curious as to how that works. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry now, but I'm not done yet. I have a question. Part 2. So according to this handout, you're saying that the definition here that you guys are working with is e-cigarettes, and I think that's where a lot of this confusion is coming in. And I particularly have a problem with this. It says an e-cigarette is a battery-powered device that allows users to inhale an emission containing nicotine or other substances. Well, I can see why that would be put into the nicotine component, so the active component would be put into regulation, because it's an active ingredient, it's a drug, and it has health risks. However, where I think the real rub is, and it's always been where I found an inconsistency in the logic coming from a scientific background, is that we're putting regulations on items, other ingredients, vapors, I'll say emissions, because I don't want to get into the argument of whether some things is steam and smoke are two different things, is that there's an inconsistency there, because for items that are already used in the food industry and are regulated or considered GRAS and generally regarded as safe, you're bunching all those together. Now, I'm with you guys, I'm with the Lung Association when it comes to an emission that contains an active ingredient that is a regulated or partially regulated ingredient, such as nicotine, such as caffeine, such as some of these other ingredients that can be put in there, which are regulated. But where I have a problem is with the non-regulated. So you have my support with nicotine-related products. It makes sense. It's nicotine. It's a component of tobacco. Therefore, it can be a tobacco delivery system. And I think some of the board here may also have a confusion as to what's being discussed here, because you keep going, the American Lung Association also keeps going back and forth between, we're using the term e-cigarette and that causes the confusion, because you're describing the e-cigarette as having an active ingredient when it's a much broader base. So that's really where the issue lies with me, is that it's fine regulating items that need to be regulated, but the items that don't need to be regulated really don't need to be regulated. And that's what I think the proposed ordinance really needs to be addressed.
I understand that. I mean, it's been...
But you still use them interchangeably. You still...
Well,
the American Lung Association doesn't distinguish between emissions with controlled substances or emissions without controlled substances, correct?
The definition of an electronic smoking device can have nicotine or other substances. That is correct.
So the answer is yes, they don't distinguish between the
yes.
two.
Can I explain a rationale here? When the FDA confiscated shiploads of the original e-cigarettes from China, they analyzed the content of the e-cigarettes that were coming from China, and there were some that said no nicotine. There were some, I'm just going to say this.
I understand, and I've worked in this industry, I understand it. But what you're dealing with, that's a regulatory issue.
Right.
And to ban something that's a food, so I'm just trying to let you know where I'm coming from on this. I don't agree with the banning of safe and acceptable substances, or the regulation, I shouldn't say banning, but the regulation of the substances that are considered safe, generally recognized as safe. I do support the fact that, or the element or the component of this ordinance that does deal with, a potentially controlled product. Now, whether somebody cheats, that's a whole other issue. It's like a speeding ticket, or a speeding sign. There's a regulation. There are still going to be people that are going to cheat. There's enforcement. Enforcement is a separate issue. So thank you for your time. Any definitions on this?
John, I'd just like to echo what you just said in terms of, yes, if it was just the products that contained tobacco, then it wouldn't be such a hot debate. I don't represent you, Serena, or the American Lung Association. I do, however, absolutely abhor injustice and overregulation and the enactment of laws done solely out of fear and political pressure. That's my standpoint. I also do think it's disingenuous to say that it won't impact people, that they can still use the e-cigarettes. I think it's going to impact them severely because it's going to limit when and where they can do that. So I think it will have a significant impact, negative impact on something that is improving the health of people. So that's where I'm coming from.
Okay, next speaker, Marcia Brown-Mackin. Mackin, okay.
Okay, well, good evening, council members, and I'm going to try to speak out. My voice doesn't usually go very loud. I just want to start off by saying that tobacco use is the #1 cause of death in the unincorporated areas of Alameda County, as it is in Alameda County and in California. So as policymakers, I think that it's really terrific that you are in a position and that you have the power to help prevent and reduce tobacco use, and by passing policies that basically try to limit the amount of tobacco use that kids are going to be using and that adults are going to be using. So therefore, I urge you to try to exercise your power tonight to create strong public health and tobacco prevention policies. And this translates into including e-cigarettes into the definition of tobacco. Why is this? Because so many kids are taking up the amount of e-cigarettes that kids are using now has tripled in the recent years. They're starting with e-cigarettes, then they're going to tobacco. Likewise, a lot of adults, are saying that they've switched to e-cigarettes, but they continue to take up tobacco greater, or they think that they're going to quit, and they haven't. That it's not, e-cigarettes are actually not, when you're looking statistically, we do know cases, one here and there and so forth, but they're not an aid to quitting smoking. In fact, smokers who use e-cigarettes, or as Serena has said, but it's worth repeating, are about 30% less likely to quit than smokers who don't use cigarettes. And the reason that it's so important, contrary to earlier info when e-cigarettes were first getting released, they thought that it's just some sort of a harmless vapor that's coming up in the air. They are not safe. The vapor that is emitted does not only contains the nicotine, and the nicotine, by the way, is then inhaled by the person standing next to me, but also formaldehyde, benzene, which are both known carcinogens. There's a high level of particulate matter in the vapor, and there's also a lot of heavy metals, including cadmium and other heavy metals. So that's the reason that I just urge you to try to, go ahead with this, and try to endorse this policy tonight to include e-cigarettes in the definition of what a tobacco product is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Randy Rogers.
Hello, my name is Randy Rogers. I work at Ryzanych in Castro Valley. I have been coming to these meetings for a while now. I've done my own studies and research, and tobacco use in unincorporated Alameda County has dropped to 11%, like Serena said, and I feel like I just might be responsible for most of that, at least some of it, and my colleagues. Every single day I get to have somebody else come in and tell me their story, and I get to hear story after story, and they're all pretty amazing stories. These people have had their lives changed. They feel healthier. They're playing better in their rock bands. The list goes on and on. And when I honestly see these people getting off of tobacco, they look healthier, they act healthier, I know that we're doing something right. My position on this ordinance is it needs to be thrown out. It doesn't make any sense. It's not correct. And I don't see how it can uphold in a court of law. So the best thing for us to do and for our community would be to throw this ordinance out, sit down, look at real science that actually shows numbers, not just saying that this isn't, how much is that, I want to know. I've looked at studies endlessly, I've sent them to Bob, and the studies are out there that show real facts and real numbers, and you can find out exactly what's going on if you look, but you gotta look. So I say we throw this ordinance out, write up a new one, let's be smart about it, and it might not be what everyone else is doing, but it can be the thing that they should be doing.
Thank you. I don't have any cards. Is there anyone else who wants to speak to this item? Bob? You can just let it go now.
Still only have a minute, sir.
I'm Bob Swanson. I live in Castro.
Can you turn the mic on, please?
Actually, I wasn't going to speak, but I'm just motivated to. You know, my grandfather died of emphysema from smoking. My mother died from emphysema for smoking. My father died from alcoholic cirrhosis of the liver from alcohol. I have COPD from smoking. And the best way to quit smoking that I found is not the patch, not the gum, but inhaled nicotine is by far the superior way to quit smoking, in my opinion. This idea that a vaporizer, a tool that has no plant material in it whatsoever, is a tobacco product is absurd. The courts make decisions sometimes that are really stupid. Like, for example, corporations are people. Show me the birth canal a corporation ever came out of. That's what I want to see. The studies that are used by the Lung Association are cherry-picked. There's no definitive studies at this point. Far premature to put any ordinance through. And to call it tobacco is the biggest lie on the planet. It's just not tobacco. It's a tool. And e-cigarettes are just vaporizers that look like a cigarette. That's all it is. It's a vaporizer. Like the Glade vaporizer that you plug into your wall and shoots e-juice into your room and you smell it. The idea that kids are getting these, well, we do sting operations here in Alameda County. And we could do more if we had more money to do it, but is there anything in that ordinance that gives us more money to do sting operations? Haran? Is there? No. No, so the care about children is not really the emphasis here. The emphasis here is to declare it a tobacco product. And I couldn't figure out why declare this a tobacco product? Why didn't they support Ellen Corbett's legislation in Sacramento? Well, she didn't call it a tobacco product. She was trying to ban them from being sold in vending machines so kids couldn't get them. But the Lung Association wouldn't support that because they didn't call it a tobacco product. And I couldn't figure that out. I kept looking and looking. And I figured it out finally. It's all about money. It's not about public health. It's about wealth. All the beneficiaries of the tobacco fund, including Alameda County, are all pretty much in favor of this ordinance because California borrowed a lot of money against this tobacco fund, and it appears that there's not going to be enough money to pay it back. And so they're desperate to find a product that they can tax to backfill it. And also, when you tax, and it will be taxed, it has to be a ballot measure, because here in California, there's a ballot measure that was approved in 1988, Prop 99, and it says, it defines a tobacco product for the state of California, and a tobacco product has to have 50% tobacco in it. This doesn't. It's in conflict with, the voters are in conflict with what this court decision is, apparently. This is the best smoking cessation device I have ever come across. And it's high tech. People are interested in it. It's got some sizzle. The products that are used from the pharmaceutical companies, they've got no sizzle whatsoever. People aren't attracted to them. Matter of fact, their inhaler that they have tastes like ashtray. If it had a cherry flavor or something, maybe more people would be using them. But their sales are going down. E-cigarettes are going up. The use of tobacco among minors is going down. Why? I think e-cigarettes might have something to do with it. And there was a study done in Canada that, in Canada they were saying, oh, children are getting all these things. Well, they did a study in Canada and found out 98% of them that were getting these e-cigarettes or these vaporizers had no nicotine in them. It's just like inhaling a Glade vaporizer. This is foolish. We need to start over again. We need to put together a group of people who understand these things, look at the laws, look at the regulation, and look at the science in this thing. The science is not conclusive. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak to this item? I'll go ahead and close the public portion of the meeting. Council members? Paul, is there anything you wanted to respond to out of all that?
No, I'm really here to get your input. If you guys have a recommendation, I want to make sure that gets transmitted to the Board of Supervisors.
Okay.
I have a quick update. So I was mentioning I could get a site for Cetera. So it's Cetera Inc. versus FDA. It's 627 F3rd 891 and in the DC Circuit 2010. That's all.
Thank you. Well, I can't speak for the council, but I can say that my position has not changed. I think that it is terribly premature, that we shouldn't be proceeding until we are out of the initial study phase, and we've determined that it is in fact hazardous to your health to vape. I'm almost speechless, which is very rare. I think that I'm ready to make a motion in terms of a recommendation once the rest of the council members have said that.
Well, I think I share Member Morales' frustration here. Actually, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed for staff and the agency that has actually worked on this, and what the efforts and the energies that fostered the whole process. I mean, this is a perfect example of basically bribery. We have, it's unfortunate because we have municipalities that are needing money, and through processes like this, we're seeing the initial results, and that is that rules, regulations, laws, ordinances are going to be imposed as a guise for revenue generating. I spent 6 years advising the state of California and learned in that 6 years that legislators, their number one job, one is to get reelected. Number two is generate funds for the state of California. And unfortunately, I think this is turning out to be a very good example of that. I'm with the tobacco, anti-tobacco people. I'm not a tobacco person. I'm with the American Lung Association. But tobacco is tobacco. Bob pointed out as a very good fact. The state of California has defined tobacco, and for the fact that this does not meet that definition, anything in this ordinance, actually everything in this ordinance is contrary to the wishes of the people of the state of California, and does not meet the definition as they follow the definition that was voted upon by the electorate. That amount of oversight is just unnecessary. And my position, I'm just going to restate it again. It's in record. I hope that the minutes reflect my comments from previous meetings, and that when it comes to an active, it makes sense to regulate the actives. When it comes to products which are considered food ingredients, it doesn't make sense. And I understand it can make enforcement a bit difficult because a person who is exhaling steam, there's no way of identifying immediately whether they're exhaling steam containing a nicotine or a steam that basically contains the same chemical constituents as the steam that comes off your pot of spaghetti sauce that's cooking on the stove. And people, it contains the same stuff. That's my background, okay? So there's a difference between the two components. And that's where I'd like to see, if anything, the ordinance make a distinction. I don't have a problem regulating electronic devices which are delivery systems for a product that should be regulated or that is regulated. I don't have a problem with that at all. But I do have a problem where products that are food ingredients, products that are recognized as safe, are being brought in unfairly into the umbrella of this regulation. And it's overstepping. It It's beyond the regulation, it's out of bounds, it's every other definition I can come up with that, just says it just doesn't make sense. And for, good people, in these agencies that have the technical background and also the expertise in wordsmithing and crafting good legislation and good ordinance. And I'm beside myself, I'm frustrated and I'm embarrassed that this ordinance continues to move forward in the form that it is. Again, I support an ordinance, I support a good ordinance, but right now, with all the speculative conversation that's come out, and with the inconsistencies in the ordinance, I do not support the ordinance as it stands. And I will agree with the testimony of Mr. Swanson in that if the county would like to take a realistic approach to this, an honest approach to this, put together a committee that would approach this in a professional manner to produce a fair, good ordinance, I would highly support that. Otherwise, I have zero support for the ordinance as it stands. Not because of all its content, but because it is in itself, a portion of its content is incorrect. If we can edit that out, it'll work. If not, I cannot support this as it stands.
There's too much said.
Yeah, in the interest of saving time, I'm going to just say I don't support the ordinance that happened from day one, and the changes made it worse. So, Cheryl?
Okay, I'm going to give this a try. Motion that the MAC hereby advises the Board of Supervisors that A, the jury is still out, vaping has not been proven hazardous to one's health. B, vapors not smoked in e-cigarettes that do not contain tobacco are not and cannot be considered a tobacco product. C, that e-cigarettes should absolutely not be lumped in with tobacco products because they are not in and of themselves tobacco products. D, that the board should be cognizant and give serious consideration to the fact that this ordinance as written may also be more about financial health than public health, as it is being supported by entities who have a vested interest in maintaining cash flow from the state tobacco fund via ultimate taxation of e-cigarettes as tobacco products. E, that enactment of this ordinance will actually deter smokers from quitting tobacco and will have a negative effect on public health. F, this draft ordinance is more problematic than the previous and too overreaching and should either be thrown out or rethought and rewritten yet again. G, that the only changes to the ordinance worth saving is that which makes it illegal for e-cigarettes to not be sold to minors, illegal for e-cigarettes to be sold to minors, which is already state law, and that steps should be taken to ensure that they are kept behind counters and not sold in vending machines. And that the county begin work anew on a dedicated e-cigarette ordinance that enlists and involves stakeholders and those directly affected by the ordinance through an open public process. I further move that this motion of the MAP be presented in its entirety to the Board of Supervisors as part of the staff report to the board.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Question.
So, Paul, I was trying to write everything down. Okay, that is perfect. Okay,
Most of that's in writing already.
okay.
Just a comment on when you were mentioning the sales restrictions to minors. There's one additional component about that's in the proposed ordinance, which is mandatory carding for persons who look under a certain age. That's state law for tobacco products, but it's not state law for
I can
smoking
agree with that.
devices.
I'll amend my motion to include that also, the mandatory carding.
Okay.
Yeah,
Second.
I think, I'll accept a second.
Okay, motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Thank you. And with that, we are adjourned. Oh, wait, Paul's pointing. Oh, we have an announcement. Okay, we're unadjourned. Navigating Cell Tower Regulations Workshop presented by Jonathan K. Kramer, Esquire, is going to be held at the library here on Wednesday, April 1st from 6:30 to 8:30. and it's going to involve who regulates radio frequency emissions from cell towers, what do local governments consider when reviewing applications for cell towers, how does cellular technology work, and are radio frequency emissions the same as microwave radiation? Don't miss it. We are adjourned.